Next item is the annual report from the city auditors, a presentation by Sharon Erickson. So welcome. Now we do have a rather full agenda, so I understand you have a 15-minute PowerPoint. I'll try to limit us to a few questions each, and then we can move forward. How's that?
Sounds great to me. So I'll try to keep this as brief as I can. I know you do have a full agenda. Again, I'm Sharon Erickson. I'm San Jose City Auditor. So just for those of you who don't know me or know about, put it on the other side, know about my office, I'm one of the people who's appointed by the City Council. There are 5 council appointees. So the City Council appoints the city manager, the city auditor, city clerk, city attorney, and the independent police auditor. All of us work directly for the City Council. So when I have a performance evaluation, it's in front of the City Council, which is always lots of fun. My office is about 15 people in total. We are charged with auditing city programs. The city also has external financial auditors who do the financial audits of the city's books. That is, they prepare the comprehensive annual financial report and audit that document so that those are the documents that are provided to bondholders and so on and so forth. My office does a variety of work for those who aren't familiar with it. Some of our most recent projects include things like street pavement. My joke is, how many auditors does it take to figure out our streets need repair? We did street pavement. We looked at library hours, hoping to figure out how we could open libraries more hours. And we worked with the department in that case to find ways to improve efficiency of library staffing so that they could, for half the money, open for another day a week. Some of our audits are non-controversial, some of them are controversial, like our recent golf audit. Current projects that we have in the pipeline that you may be looking for, I believe tomorrow we're going to be issuing a report on measuring San Jose's financial condition. So this is trying to make the city's financial statements understandable for the people who most care about the services that are delivered, and that's you, the residents. We're issuing a report on the use and coordination of volunteers by the city across all departments. We're issuing a report in the next month or 2 on street sweeping. We've got another one on the recycled water program of the city and on the city's technology deployments, that is all the major new systems the city is proposing. So that's some of what we do. Among the reports we do is this annual report on city services, and thank you so much for having me come to talk to you about this. For those of you who've been here before, it will look very similar to previous years. And if anybody was at the council meeting, I apologize in advance. It's the same presentation that I made to the city council. This is our 8th report on city services. You've got it in the yellow cover in front of you. The report is intended to summarize performance data about the cost, quantity, quality, timeliness, and public opinion of the city services that the city does offer. It includes historical trends and comparisons to targets and other cities. Our goal is, we hope that it contributes to good governance by providing residents and other stakeholders with transparent information about what services the city provides. It is an independent, impartial assessment of those services, so it's coming from my independent office, not directly from the city manager's office. So unlike a lot of our audits, which have findings and recommendations, this report is intended to be informational. It covers the year, last year, so it's the year ended June 30, 2015. So we start with the overall cost of city services. So what this will tell you, and again, this report is kind of almanac of city services. So I think within this report, you'll all find something of interest to you, and I'm going to go through the different departments briefly. But we always start with cost. So the city's operating cost is about $1,500 per resident. You can see here the departmental operating expenditures. So the police department spends about $308 per resident. You can see it's about $176 per resident for fire, about $31 for libraries. Some departments are funded by general tax dollars, for example, the fire department. Other departments are funded primarily by user fees, something like the airport. The report does summarize performance metrics for every city department. That includes the visible services that you see every day, the cops and firefighters out on the street. It also includes those of us who work here in City Hall. Second thing I'd like to show you is that the report includes the results of a statistically valid survey of resident opinions about the City of San Jose and city services. This was the 5th year in a row that we participated in the National Citizen Survey, which is actually not of citizens, but that's another story. That's the name of the survey. It's a standardized survey that's administered to residents in local jurisdictions across the country. 3,000 San Jose residents were selected at random by postal address and received a mail survey last September, and were asked their opinions about the overall quality of life in San Jose and specific services. The survey was available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. As you can see here, 48% of the residents surveyed rated city services as good or excellent. 52% rated the quality of life in San Jose as good or excellent. 63% rated their own neighborhoods as good or excellent places to live. And 66% would recommend San Jose as a place to live. It was notable that while only 1 in 10 residents rated the cost of living in San Jose as good or excellent, that's a pretty low score, residents did rate highly the opportunities for employment, for shopping, as well as having a community that's open and accepting of people of all backgrounds. Residents did identify public safety and the economy as priorities for the community in the next 2 years. 94% of residents said it was important for San Jose to focus on the overall feeling of safety. 86% thought it was important for the city to focus on the overall economic health of the city. I want to point out that nearly every city service received similar or lower ratings from respondents in 2015 compared to the prior year. For many services, the ratings have been steadily decreasing for the last 5 years that we've been doing the survey, as the city went through significant budget and service reductions. Residents generally feel less safe and less engaged. They report San Jose is less clean and have lower satisfaction with options for businesses, services, housing, and recreation. That's our challenge. So our report includes background information on city revenues, spending, and staffing. So I said in response to a decade of budget shortfalls, the city dramatically reduced its workforce. With 5,700 full-time equivalent employees, the authorized workforce is nearly 1,700 to 2,000 fewer than it was 10 years ago. That's a lot of people who are not delivering service anymore. Over the last decade, staffing and service reductions hit nearly every city department. And while recent budgets restored some positions, the majority of city departments are well below their historic staffing levels. As a result, you can see here San Jose has fewer employees per resident than it had in the past, and fewer than other large California cities. Though employee turnover, which has been a subject of some discussion in the newspapers, among other places, and certainly among here at City Hall, employee turnover is down from a high that we saw in 2010-11, that's the big spike. That's the year when more than 875 employees left the city. We did see a rise in people leaving the city last year. On average, about 11% of city positions are vacant. What we were concerned about is last year we had 524 employees leave the city, which is not that unexpected in terms of turnover, but we only had 478 positions filled with new employees, which means we were cumulatively decreasing in employees. So hiring is still an issue. Our report includes performance metrics for every city department. I'll include a few of those. Here's the airport. As you can see here, 9.6 million airline passengers used San Jose Mineta Airport last year. It's about 14% of regional air traffic. You can see that in the bottom right-hand corner. Excuse me, I always forgot to bring water. The airport is generally funded by user fees, so the number of passengers is really important to the financial health of the airport. The airport is paying significantly more debt service than it has in the past due to the completion of the new terminal. They're paying about $98 million a year in debt service for those new facilities. Resident satisfaction remains high with the airport. About 73% of residents rated the overall ease of using the airport as good or excellent. The Office of Economic Development works on job creation and revenue generation for the city. The thing I wanted to point out here was the comparison of tax revenue. As you can see here, San Jose receives less tax revenue. You can see us down toward the bottom there. We received about $760 per capita, so that's per resident. Sales tax was about $170 of that, so per resident. In comparison, a city like Palo Alto or even Cupertino, Mountain View, and Milpitas, they each received at least $1,000 in taxes per resident. This puts San Jose at a disadvantage in funding city services compared to these other cities. The graphic at the right shows jobs in San Jose. About half of San Jose's 1 million residents are employed, but there are only about 400,000 jobs located within the city. So San Jose is the only large city where more residents commute out of the city to work than commute into the city to work. And as you well know, if you've seen the freeways lately, other communities up the peninsula are strong job centers, so that's where our residents are going. This map shows that where jobs are concentrated in San Jose. Each dot shows 200 manufacturing or industrial jobs. So the red dots show manufacturing, industrial. The purple dots show retail. The Environmental Services Department is one of the major departments in the city. It holds the contracts for recycling and garbage service for more than 300,000 residential households in San Jose. It also is responsible for treating wastewater for nearly 1.4 million residents in San Jose and other South Bay cities. Most of ESD's revenue comes from customer fees. Less than 1% comes from the city's general fund or its general taxes. We do track rate increases, muni water rate increases. We're about 11% last year, but we're below the average of other San Jose water retailers. Utility rates for garbage and recycling increased slightly. The rates for garbage, recycling, sewer, and stormwater have increased significantly over the past 10 years. 98%, which was a pretty startling number of residents, reported they conserved water in the last 12 months in response to the drought. Residents generally have favorable opinions of garbage, recycling, and yard waste. San Jose residents are recycling more than they landfill. You can see that graph on the bottom that shows on the top is the amount recycled or composted or reused, and on the bottom is landfill. The fire department, shown here, responded to 84,000 emergency incidents last year. 62% of those were medical emergencies. Less than 3% were fires. I'm always asked how many fires did we have. So of that, 2,100 were fires. That can include vehicle fires as well as home fires and so on. The fire department responded to 73% of priority 1 incidents, the heaviest, the most emergency, the highly rated emergency incidents. They responded to 73% of those within 8 minutes. This is below the target of 80%, but it's higher than it was the previous year. If you break out the priority 1 response time, which is the graphic shown on the bottom left, the fire department met its target for dispatch time. That's how long it takes to get you through 911 and get somebody on, get the call out to the fire station. but it met its, and then you can see the turnout time, the target is less than 2 minutes, and then the travel time is, the target is less than 4 minutes. You can see that it met its travel standard for only 46% of the time. Fire service continues to be rated very highly by our residents. 74% of residents rated fire service good or excellent. Next one I'd like to cover is housing. So San Jose, of course, I don't need to tell you, remains one of the least affordable cities in the country. In 2015, only 10% of residents, as I said before, rated affordability, rated the availability of affordable housing as good or excellent. 68% considered that availability to be poor. As shown here, home prices are at an all-time high and have continued to rise. Home buyers face median prices for a single-family home of $865,000. Average monthly rents also increased, reaching $2,400. The city's 2015 homeless census and survey identified 4,000 homeless individuals. That's the graphic on the bottom right of that chart. Those were individuals who were homeless at the time of the count. It's a point-in-time count. In partnership with other agencies, the Housing Department assisted 1,000 homeless individuals into permanent housing in 2014-15. So as you can see in that kind of graphic, we're trying to track the trends so that you know whether or not this is good or bad. At least you can judge it against what we did last year. The next one is the library. The library is 23, it consists of 23 libraries actually, including the main Martin Luther King Library downtown. There's an additional library, the Village Square branch, which is expected to open soon. With new libraries opening in the past few years, the total number of library hours open is climbing back up there. That's the graphic on the upper right. However, even last year, after opening another day a week, we're still below where we were before. Although total circulation remained high, 9.8 million items, including ebooks, circulated in San Jose's public library. It was 6% less than the previous years, a trend that's continued since the branch library hours were cut in 2010-11. A map showing circulation by branch, so you can actually see the circulation by your branch library, is included in our report. It's on page 69. The number of visits to the library also decreased. It was down about 5%, and down 16% from where we were 10 years ago when libraries were open more hours. Expanded library hours did go into effect in July of last year, so we expect to see the impact of that in our upcoming report at the end of this year. 69% of residents rated library services as good or excellent. In the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department, as you know, or may know, the city actually owns 53 community centers. But again, due to recent budget constraints, the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services only operates a dozen of those centers. So the 53 are listed on this slide. The dozen in bold are the only ones that the city is actually operating. This list is shown here, and it's also in the report. It's on page 75 if you want to look at it later. The remaining centers were used by outside organizations or other city programs. The 10 hub city, what we call hub community centers, and the Bascom Community Center were open a total of 42 to 72 hours a week, with limited hours on Fridays and Saturdays. I like to point out that no city-run center had regularly scheduled Sunday hours. 87% of residents reported visiting a park class at least once last year, but less than half of our residents thought senior services or youth services were good or excellent. Planning, building, and code enforcement. So the city has Permit Center on the first floor of City Hall. The Permit Center served 26,000 customers last year. The building activity in the city has remained high. The value of the construction, you can see in the upper right-hand corner. We follow that in part because that's going to drive our property tax. The value of construction dropped from the prior year, which was pretty unprecedented. Planning, building inspections, building permits all saw slight increases from the prior year, Plan checks were slightly lower. While the number of building permits issued has returned to pre-recession levels, the number of our development staff in the development center is not. So the permit center met its timeliness targets, as shown on the bottom of that chart, for only 2 out of the 7 processes that we showed. That means we're not hitting our targets with regards to building permits. Police department. So the police department handled 1 million calls for service in 2014-15. Over the past 10 years, as you've well heard, the number of authorized sworn positions has fallen from 141 to 109 per 100,000 residents. The number of arrests has fallen by almost a half, from 34,000 10 years ago to 18,000 last year. This map shows, the map here on the upper left, shows in the darker blue areas where police responses were concentrated last year. And as shown in the graphics on the bottom of the page, the average response time to priority 1 calls was 6.9 minutes, which is slower than the department's target of 6 minutes and slightly slower than last year. Priority 1 calls involve present or imminent danger to life or major property loss. As you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, where we're experiencing the dramatic increases is priority 2 calls. So the average response time there was 9.6 minutes last year, which is much slower than our target of 11 minutes. It's about a minute faster than it was last year. Priority 2 calls are those that involve injury or property damage, or the potential for either to occur. Only 44% of residents rated police services as good or excellent. Those ratings have been dropping. Last year, the year before it was 46%. And then again, also on police, in 2014, San Jose's rate of major crime per 100,000 residents did continue to decrease from a spike in 2012. So it dropped to 2,800 major crimes per 100,000 residents. For the second year in a row, San Jose's rate is below the comparable state national averages, as shown on the upper right. In 2012, we actually moved above those state and national averages. So it's moved back down below those averages. As shown here on the lower left, the largest portion of San Jose's major crimes were property crimes. They're shown in the light blue. The major property crimes include burglary, larceny, and vehicle theft. They decreased 4% from last year, from the prior year. The number of major violent crimes, shown here in the dark blue on that chart, stayed about the same. 2014 did see a 16% drop in homicides compared to the prior year. As shown on the lower right, San Jose's rate of major crime per 100,000 residents, which is typically the way it's measured across the country, was about mid-range of other large California cities. Next, retirement. I cover this in part because the city does have a large liability for retirement, and pension benefits is always a subject of some discussion. So I like to try to make sure people understand at least a few of the numbers here. So during 2014-15, the city actually, the pension systems, and for those of you who are new to all of this, the city has its own pension systems. So there are 2 pension systems that are run by the city. What we saw in 2014-15 was pension benefit payments continued to exceed the contributions into the retirement systems. That's the graphic on the upper left. In total, the plans have more beneficiaries than they do active members. It's what we call a mature pension plan. As you can see from the graph on the upper right, the ratio of active members to beneficiaries is down below 1 to 1. In 1980, that ratio was 5 to 1. What that means is, in 1980, we had 5 active employees for every retiree. Now we're down below 1 to 1. Both plans had negative rates of return last year. It was down about 1%, which is not uncommon for these large pension plans, but we did decrease slightly last year. What this means is that total plan assets decreased from $5.3 billion to about from $5.5 billion the year before. So there is a lot of money in those pension plans. We are watching it very carefully. As of June 2014, the plan's independent actuaries were responsible for determining the city's contribution rates, determined that the systems were $3.3 billion short of what they already should have set aside for pensions and retiree health care. That unfunded liability is about $230,000 per retiree per federated member, and about $350,000 short for what we already should have set aside for each police and fire member. And then, I believe, finally, the Department of Transportation. So I just went in alphabetical order here. In 2014, San Jose's injury crash rate remained about the same as it was in the prior year. It's at about 2.5 fatal or injury crashes per 1,000 residents. The national average, we should note, is about 5.1. San Jose's streets had a pavement condition index of 62 out of 100, which, although labeled fair, means that most of our streets, it's condition rating, most of our streets are worn to the point where expensive repairs may be needed to prevent them from deteriorating rapidly. This map, which is shown on page 105 of our report, and is also available online so that you can click onto it and see the condition of your street, which you can see whether or not the engineers agree with your assessment of the condition of your street. You can see the pavement condition. The good streets are shown in blue. Those are the ones who've had repairs within the last 7 to 10 years. Red, yellow, and orange means the streets are in fair, poor, or in failed condition, meaning that they need to be rebuilt. So when I look at this map and I look at the amount of red, those are the streets that need to be completely rebuilt. Although the Department of Transportation has continued to make corrective repairs, such as filling 10,000 potholes. I know everybody wants to know how many potholes did we fill last year. And they are patching damaged areas. Only 24% of residents rated street repair as good or excellent last year. It's one of the worst ratings among all the city services in our national survey. So our services report is a once-in-a-year snapshot of city services. It's intended to give you a broad overview of the performance of those routine city services that don't always get talked about. The city has seen general fund shortfalls. You're aware of that. I know you've read about it in the paper and heard about it. The budget situation has improved since those large shortfalls in 2010 and 2011. But the city is still providing fewer services with significantly fewer staff than it did before the recession. And we do continue to face enormous challenges. So I always like to point out that those of us who are left in the city, I do think it is a dedicated crew of employees that you have out there who are successfully providing an extraordinary array of services. We do know from looking at the survey results that people thought we were tightening our belts, and now they're ready for a change. They're ready for services to get back up to where they should be. I think all of us in City Hall know that, are aware of that, and are doing what we can with limited services and a limited number of staff. So this report provides a lot of information. It's intended that if you choose to look at a service, you can look it up in the report. We don't expect you to read the report from start to finish. But if you're curious about streets or police or fire or any of those services, you can look it up. You can see whether or not the city is achieving the goals and the targets that it's set. We hope that the council can use this to help weigh priorities. It's very difficult to know if you have an extra dollar, where do you put it in the face of all this need? And I hope that this also helps you with your ongoing work in trying to juggle priorities with your commission and your advice to the city council. Our full report, of course, is on the web. You saw the link. We do have copies in our office, so if anybody is interested, they can stop by and get those. And I'd like to thank you for your attention. I hope I kept it to about 15 minutes. And I hope this information is useful. I welcome your input on what kinds of information you like to see from the city. We are constantly working and improving the information and the public information we put out for you. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. So, questions from the commission? Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. That was very thorough. I had just two quick questions, and I missed the first one. My apologies. I was moving from my pen. How much did you say on the first slide was the per capita spending?
So it's on the first page of the very first page of your report as well. It's $1,459 per resident.
Okay, and then second question, on the Office of Economic Development, you're citing that they collect 760. So when you're talking about the money that is collected from tax revenue, does that include business license or is that just sales taxes? Page 33.
The business tax is included in that other category, that very small other category. So this chart, it's going to be a little bit bigger if you look at it in your report instead of on the screen. It's on page 33 of your report. So what you can see here, so in San Jose, that kind of peachy color to the far right is other, and business taxes are in there. So cities rely real heavily on property tax. Property tax in California is limited under Prop 13. So cities are more and more relying on sales tax. That's the next kind of bar over on that graphic if you're looking at San Jose. Then there's hotel taxes, and then there's utility taxes. So those are on utilities. And then other taxes would include the business tax in that category.
Okay. Is there an error here? Last question. In the second paragraph, the Office of Economic Development provided services to 29 businesses.
No, that's not an error.
That's not an error? That's very low.
Yeah.
Business Development and Economic Strategy gets 2.5 million and they only work with 29 businesses?
Well, they provide other services with that 2.9 million. So they're also running Work to Future. They're providing the outreach for the business community. They do run the small business owner, the business owner space. So they do run that 29 companies are those major companies that they're working with to relocate into San Jose. So yes, it is a very low number. In a city as large as us, with a tax base as low as ours. On the other hand, in terms of what economic development staff do, they have a team of 6 who are working on those kinds of efforts. They're also working with small business owners and doing a variety of other things. But it absolutely is a very small number.
Thank you.
I have one question. Looking at the pie chart on page 11, different expenditures, police is the largest, but the second one is citywide capital transfers and reserves. What is that?
Yeah, so that's one of those really large categories
It's like saying miscellaneous then, right?
yeah, it's like saying miscellaneous.
It's kind of hard to know what it is.
Right, so it includes all of these, so other departments is that 7% one, so that's what's shown on the bottom here. Some of okay, I'm gonna stumble on this. So the city every year, it's as if in your checking account, the way normal people do it, they count how much money comes in and how much money goes out.
Mm-hmm.
When the city budgets, it also includes your beginning balance, if that makes any sense. So it not only, which actually is probably the way I treat my checkbook when I go to the store, which is I have $300 in my checking account. I know I've got $100 in income, so I figure I have $400 to spend, right? So on the one hand, we're balancing revenue and expenditure, but then you have this beginning, what we call beginning fund balance, which is the $300 I had in my checking account, is the equivalent. So we re-budget that at the end of the year. So There are substantial reserves in the city, and I'm going to blank on how many millions of dollars we have in reserves. Those get rebudgeted every year. That's a big chunk of that. Other things that are in citywide include things like workers' compensation costs, which total about $33 million a year. There are other significant costs that are in that category. But you know what? Next year, I bet you we come back and we break out that category in our report.
And public, Ed Rask wants to ask a question.
Ed Rask, speaking for myself. Can you go back to the economic development page? Okay. You show jobs there, but you don't show the jobs per employed residents, which I think we're down around 80 jobs per employed residents. Can we maybe next year show that? The other one is, how many people are actually leaving San Jose to work in other cities? I've heard numbers anywhere from 60,000 to as high as 100,000 people leave San Jose every day to work in other cities. That would be a good number to see also. The other one is, City San Jose spends a lot of money on non-city services. In other words, it gives money away for various purposes. It does fee reduction. In other words, there's community-based organizations. You did an audit on it. Now economic development does that. What economic development doesn't do is show things like when you do a fee reduction on transportation infrastructure of $30 million. They don't show something like that. They don't show the $20 million that was done on fee reduction for parks. They don't show a number of other things that are given to for-profit companies. In other words, where they're leasing space under market, they're providing grants and other things that we don't see. And that, my understanding, if you look at it, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million plus a year. So it'd be good to have that same type of report for the for-profit companies that we have for the nonprofit. And Sunshine Reform recommended that any expenditure over $250,000 be accounted for that way on the outs, that's being given away. And there's a lot of money going out. And some of that money, we don't do cost-benefit analysis. We don't see when that comes in or when it goes out, what we're getting for our money. That's another thing that was recommended. And it falls into the budget area also. Appreciate it. Great work, by the way. Thank you.
If I could just respond on the one thing on page 34 of the report, there is a graphic that shows jobs per employed resident in San Jose. And you can see it's kind of moving up and down with the recession and employment. But we are far below our target of 1-to-1. So the goal of any city is to have a job for every resident who wants to be employed.
And just as an aside, the Vision 2040 had a goal of 1.3, which means you have to have people come in from the Central Valley, or I don't know where they come from, and now they're revising, going through an update, and they're considering changing that number as part of the Vision 2040 update.
The county average last time I saw was 1.25. In other words, 125 jobs for every 100. We're at about 80, which is about 2/3 of that. Palo Alto is, if I remember, about 300.
But we can't all be Palo Alto.
Yeah, I know, but our next door neighbor, Santa Clara, is around 235.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I was going to ask, anybody want to ask questions for follow-up questions for next time, or did you any others? I mean, originally in our work plan, we wanted to ask some follow-up questions for next time, or next month, or next 2 months from now, or anything. Remember regarding this? Yeah. Any follow-up questions?
I have one thing, and that is on page 79. It talks about the building division, and it says here that 42% of the building inspections within its goal of 24 hours. 42% is not good, and that's something that makes money. And how, and you mentioned that, we have still employees to fill in. Why haven't they built it up? This has been going on for a couple of years, where the building is good, but we have like inspectors coming in, like, who don't work for us.
So I'm not the planning director, so I'm just the auditor, but I do know that the planning department has had trouble keeping staff and hiring staff. The city is going to be holding a hiring fair coming up, I believe it's, oh no, I will forget the date. The 27th. So we are hoping to fill, the city has a lot of open positions. So the city currently has about 700 vacancies. So we see that in the service delivery. So we need to get people employed. We're having a hiring fair to try and fill those positions. It is tough because people like to work for the city of San Jose. We are a great training ground. We can train people to do everything that a big city does, and then they can go off to a small city where we like to joke here at City Hall, they can kick back and respond to all 20 residents who come in to talk to them. So people do like to come to San Jose, but it's also others jurisdictions love to snatch our people up. So we are hiring and we hope to get those positions filled. I think, when you cut positions, it's really tough to staff back up. It takes some time. And I know it's an issue of great concern to the mayor and to the planning department itself to get those figures back up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.